Hey, great to meet you, man. So yeah, I'm based in Durham, North Carolina. You like studied in America, right? You went to
Yeah, I did a master's at Berkeley.
Yeah.
So I spent a couple of years there. 1 year at the master's and 1 year with the law firm that I'm with now, Nishith Desai Associates.
A not practicing attorney, but yeah, I'm licensed, or actually not. I'm inactive, but I was licensed in Florida.
Okay.
And, went to law school at Northwestern, got my MBA at Kellogg.
Oh, nice.
Did buy two, get two degrees. Just kind of, in law school, we took contract law, right? We took contracts. And what do you think happens with, the real thing about the blockchain is smart contracts. And so I'm wondering, when you first heard of crypto and blockchain, kind of like, how'd you stumble upon it? And did it go off immediately? Or did you have to kind of ease into it? Like, did you see the light, or did it, kind of, was it a dimmer switch?
It took some time. So I'll tell you, it was actually somewhat inorganic. So I first heard about Bitcoin when there was the first boom in 2013. So I think that's when it first got mainstream attention, at least in India. So, I mean, it was there, but I never understood it. I knew that something's happening, but I was like immersed in my own thing. And then I went off to the masters, and then got hired by Nishith. And just about then, I had come across Ethereum's website, which had looked pretty like funky, futuristic. Couldn't figure out what's going on. They said it's a world computer. So I was like, this is interesting. And then the whole smart contract stuff was just, I think, picking off. So this was 2015, 16.
Yeah,
I think they were just kind of trying to get developers into the ecosystem and stuff. But I still had a very blurry idea of what a smart contract was. I guess it was kind of accurate, which is, I guess, a programmable set of actions, automated actions. But I couldn't really differentiate. I mean, that you don't need to be decentralized to do that. I mean, even a vending machine is a smart contract. So I didn't understand the blockchain concept yet. But when I got hired into Nishith, one of the supervising partners said, let's write a paper on blockchain. So Nishith kind of looks at these futuristic technologies and tries to figure out the legal issues and publish research papers on them. So we've done it for driverless cars, drones, and pretty much every new technology which comes around. So I was in the Palo Alto office, just 2 or 3 people there in a different time zone. So I had like 3 to 4 months to myself to figure out how blockchain works. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos, did a lot of reading, and cranked out the paper in around 3-4 months. And that was a great opportunity to really immerse myself and understand the ecosystem.
The lawyer, did you have to try and did you ever try to make a smart contract or some sort of code, or did you look into the intricacies of it?
So I did a Python course. I did some very basic Python stuff, but I never got the time to actually try and program a smart contract. I think now there are some platforms that are trying to make it accessible. I think OpenLaw and a few others, but it'll be good to have, if somebody can crack natural language translation into code, I think that'll be the game changer.
Well, that's what
a lot of lawyers will then get, because
the,
lawyers essentially code. I mean, when they crack, that's what we do.
I was explaining to some of my lawyer friends when I first found out about blockchain that basically, hey, listen, you got to understand that this is the law of the future, right? They're going to be teaching smart contracts and blockchain into law school because, enforceable contracts in the future are going to be code. It's not going to be purely stuff you write on like a piece of paper. Like people think it's like this, right? This, and then you sign your name. It's going to be a smart contract, and then you verify it with your private key that you agreed to that statement. And but no, that's awesome. Anyways, I'm going to go back to the actual blockchain stuff. So then, when you actually went through and wrote that paper, did you make the leap? Did you buy some crypto? Did you? I'm very interested in blockchain versus crypto. Obviously, I think you're a believer like me, but were you kind of like, hey, were you convinced about the economics of it, or did you believe that blockchain could work without a native crypto token?
I mean, I think at that stage there weren't too many people banding about that blockchain versus crypto thing. It was pretty much all the blockchain use cases you saw had tokens. You did have like Hyperledger just coming around, but R3 and even something like an R3 was I think talking about a token, and pretty much every use case, and we covered a lot of use cases across industries in that paper, what was emerging. All of them seem to be running on Ethereum or using some kind of token like colored coins, and so it seemed like you did need to have tokens to create incentives. I know that there are use cases out there which don't have tokens, but for me it was essential to understand how the token framework works, how the mining incentives work, how the block ordering solution works, etc. So you can't have an effective blockchain ecosystem without some kind of enabling framework for tokens. On me buying crypto back then, I should have, but I think back then it was still possible to do some mining. So I harbored some pipe dreams of getting some small mining equipment, and then I then procrastinated that enough. But and eventually I did. More than anything else, I wanted to kind of embed myself in the ecosystem and see how things work and stuff. But incidentally, my first exchange was ZebPay. So.
Oh, I love it. Good. I love it. It was 2/3 of a lot of Indian origin investors have used us. And we're working hard to regain that trust in everyone. I think we're doing a good job there, but step by step. But no, then I think a lot of people did that. Like when I first heard about it, I also did. I bought a little bit and then I mined some. To the dismay of my wife, we had a big Bitcoin miner in our sunroom, and she was like, after about a week of that, she's like, you got to get that out of there. And she's like, it's like people would come over to our house and they'd be like, what's that space heater you have? It's not a space heater. It's a Bitcoin miner. And she would get mad at me because I'd always bring it up. This is like 2013. And I had to move it to our basement because it was making so much noise. But the good thing is winter came and eventually became like a space heater in the basement. So I used to keep our basement warm. So the other question is, so, I love that your comment about, doing research on disruptive technologies, like, drones and say driverless cars and say even blockchain is here. And, we're both lawyers, but like, how do you think, governments, not just India, around the world should foster that, while still having regulations? Because you don't want drones flying into people and, you want good technology to be used in enabling ways to help society, but you also need to put up kind of sandbox rules. And so what are your core first principle or guiding principles in things like that?
Yeah, I guess every nation needs to start with its constitution because every nation has been set up with a slightly different set of values. Yeah. So if you take the US, which maybe arguably is more, say, libertarian than India, but even in India, the constitution was framed with the belief that fundamental rights are paramount. and state interference is called for where reasonable but cannot be excessive. So if you boil it down to reasonableness, and I think most democracies today would come down to that. It's always a cat and mouse game of not being too prescriptive, but not kind of letting say 100-year-old legislation govern things. Like, for example, although interestingly it's worked in India somehow, but the Telegraph Act of 1885 still governs telecom networks, and it's kind of working because they define telegraph so broadly that it hasn't actually needed to be amended that much. But when you look at something like the internet, it did need a new law, the Information Technology Act and some other amendments. There's no way you could just bring it up under a generic law. So, I mean, it's always been a cat and mouse game. I've been grappling with this question for some time, and it's just too case to case. I wish there was a formula, and there's been some good writing about it. I think there's been some, Harvard Business Review articles about regulatory entrepreneurship, how the Ubers and Airbnbs kind of shaped the law by going business first and then having the law crafted around their business model. So I guess people in disruptive industries have to engage with policymakers and try to help them in creating good frameworks. And at the same time, I was just going to say policymakers have to also, not be too parental about it. One thing in India which we can come to is that it shouldn't be a knee-jerk ban. It has to always be proportionate. A policymaker may believe that there's no use in Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean that a ban is what is called for, because that's not the constitution we have chosen to adopt. We've not chosen a monarchy where the king chooses what is right. The state has to be more of an enabler than a controller.
Well, I kind of agree with you. You can't have an old act. You're probably going to have to create a brand new type of, let's say, blockchain commission or a token commission, because what's happened before is people are kind of saying, is it governed by SEBI? Is it governed by the commodities exchange? Is it governed by the Reserve Bank of India? And what's really interesting is tokens can be pretty much all three, right? You can have, a token can be some art, a token could be a security, the token could be, a stable coin, right? And those are all really, if you look at branches of government, those are governed by three different, types of regulatory bodies. At least let's say the U.S., the Reserve Bank in India, and then SEBI, and then probably, Commodities Commission. So, but I'm interested in, so, in your perspective, like, what would you imagine you were, helping, you're this, the head of the, the prime minister, you're head of the legislative body, what would you do? Or what type of laws would you enforce? Because you kind of want to balance both individual rights, but also
the prime minister.
Yeah. Or let's just say you're even what's amazing is because it is a democracy. We're not a monarchy, but if you're able to set the tone of how do you get good tax policy and also promote innovation in India. And India's got some of the best software engineers in the world, right? If you go look at some of the biggest tech companies, Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai, like the CEOs of these large mega cap companies are of Indian origin. And if you go look at, where they had development centers there in India, and so to foster more growth, how would you create a legal framework?
Sure. So usually the best approach is not to have, say, a separate legislation for a separate technology, because if you have, say, a distributed ledger act, the point is that a lot of the principles for, say, securities or currency, etc., are already there in other laws. So what you're really doing is you are bringing about like a set of amendments to a basket of laws. That's what Switzerland did recently. They called it the Blockchain Act. But if you really look at it, it wasn't a new legislation. It was a set of amendments to a patchwork of different laws, securities laws, currency laws, and any law that a distributed ledger may impact. Could be commodities laws as well. So, the way we had suggested it is that currently there's no framework to regulate crypto intermediaries. So we would suggest that anybody who's running a wallet intermediary or an exchange should come under a licensing regime. And so bring people on par with, say, payment system providers, banks, stock exchanges, etc. It's like financial regulation 101 to regulate the entities who have consumer funds in trust. And then you can tweak existing laws, like bring about clarifications in the income tax law, in the GST law, in the securities law. For example, SEBI could play a more active role, like the SEC, in assessing which tokens are securities and which tokens are not. So you do have a wide variety of existing laws, which all you need is active enforcement towards the crypto space. And then you do have a little vacuum where the intermediaries are currently not regulated. So if they're regulated, that should work. And that's pretty much the playbook that's being followed by say Japan, Australia, Canada, the US. What they're doing is they're putting KYC, AML norms on the intermediaries, and looking at how existing laws already apply to the token space. Like, for example, Singapore, if you want to tokenize real estate and raise funds, you're regulated like a collective investment scheme. It's an age-old law which is already there. It's just that it applies to the distributed ledger. So, ultimately, the blockchain is a technology to enable transactions in things which humans have been doing for a number of years already. So, and there are already laws for those. So it's more a question of adapting the law towards this.
Yeah, that's great. No, I agree fully. That's a great analysis. What do you think? What do you think of DeFi? What are your thoughts on that? And because that's a little bit more user controlled, how should governments regulate those things?
Yeah, that's pretty hard actually. And in fact, what we had suggested is, can we think of a treaty around crypto? Because you do have international treaties on other things, like, for example, anti-avoidance in tax. You have something called the multilateral instrument. You have treaties over all kinds of things, the law of the sea, space law, air law, where countries agree on certain protocols. So can we align on a basic set of values, though every country has a different set of values, but can we align on a basic set of values, maybe some kind of information sharing for the space? Because DeFi kind of exists in the ether. So how does one really... the whole premise of financial regulation is to regulate the intermediaries. And where the intermediary is kind of spread across nodes and things like that. How does it really play out? Who has jurisdiction? Or do we just agree on information sharing? That could be one way to go about it. And then each country has jurisdiction over the actor in their territory. If there's a bad actor in India, India gets jurisdiction over that actor. But there's in DeFi, you don't have a single bank or a single exchange to go after. So the entire premise of financial regulation is probably flipped on its head. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah. That to me, DeFi is a very interesting thing. That's where the revolutionary stuff happens, because you could be interacting with someone in Australia to South America, and then what happens there? India bans Bitcoin. Does that mean that then you can't own Tesla stock? Or what if Tesla puts like a Bitcoin wallet? You don't receive it in a Tesla car, right? And so it's a little bit unique of like, how can you ban something like that, right? The wallet.
Yeah, exactly. And the draft clause had said you can't directly or indirectly hold or own or transfer. So then it becomes, pretty much every enterprise now has dipped its finger in this pie. It's kind of come as a hopefully perfect storm and not imperfect storm. But the way the news cycle has come is that this banning news and the global mainstream institutional interest has kind of collided at the same time, the same news cycle. So hopefully there will be a rethink on that. But otherwise, medium to long term, it seems kind of inevitable. But it's just that there will be a lot of harassment and inconvenience that the ordinary people have to go through, and some entrepreneurial dreams will be crushed in the meantime, which would be unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very interesting in that and I've been telling people it is like a sine cosine wave. The Bitcoin and it doesn't just go through boom bust cycles, but even the news, like, is it a Ponzi scheme? No, it is real. No, is it a security? No, it's a commodity. Is it a payment network? Is it a store of value? And there's these news cycles of people being very excited by the technology to being very depressed by it. And I just think it's kind of like the story of the asset class. The other question I was going to ask is, what do you think of non-fungible tokens and like, crypto art and stuff like that? Because those to me are also really interesting innovations. And if we had strict regulation, does this mean that because a work of art is put on the blockchain that you can't own it, right? And just wondering, what are your thoughts on let's say digital collectibles?
Yeah, so I've been reading more and more about that, and it's really, I think, coming to a head now. So I just read that you'll have the first music album as well on the, or maybe mainstream one. I think it was Kings of Leon or something who said that they'll put out a album NFT. But yeah, you have rappers, you have artists, and there is clearly a market for it. And you have creative people who are finding a different way to market their work. It just happens to be based on this technology. So if the legal definitions are so wide that that gets banned as well, it kind of results in a perverse outcome. But it's an exciting technology. Like, I think everybody who's been digging more into the NFT thing has kind of had their eyes open because of the kind of market that's out there, the surge in interest, the volumes, the type of art. The possibilities are kind of somewhat mind-numbing as to how you can just automatically get royalties when you sell your when you sell a JPEG file. So I think it's a new paradigm. It's what probably people were first excited about when the whole blockchain hype came. And I was just thinking about that. It's kind of maybe fructifying now in some of this. I'm not sure why it didn't happen earlier. Maybe the ecosystem wasn't mature enough or something, but these use cases were being talked about around 2015-16 when Ethereum first came, and they said you can do anything on the blockchain. But it's good that it's coming to a head now. And I was telling a friend that, she's a graphic designer, so all the stuff on Instagram is now potentially marketable. So it's pretty exciting, pretty interesting. But also, I guess you will have a tulip bulb kind of moment there with, hype cycles and it could be like the ICO wave of a couple of years back where there were some good projects and a lot of hype.
I agree.
But
I think that
and eventually it rationalizes itself.
Yeah, there are these big narratives in these crypto, we call it, these crypto bubbles, right? I think this one could be a DeFi or NFTs, and many ways people are buying digital baseball cards or this thing called NBA Top Shot. They're selling like images of people taking dunks and stuff like that. I think India could be a really cool place for that. I mean, obviously Bollywood and music and cricket. There could be some really, really fun, interesting collectibles, but you got to make sure that it's not people are doing it because it's a collectible, not because they're gambling, that's the other big issue, right? What do you think? What do you think about this idea that the idea that something is a private cryptocurrency? What is your take on that, in a sense?
I mean, the way the government seems to be looking at it is anything other than a sovereign-backed token is private cryptocurrency. So, yeah. I mean, some of the reports and other sources are suggesting that the government may view that currency is a sovereign function. So, any other potential competitor to currency is a private cryptocurrency and should not be accessed. Of course, they've listed out the reasons: volatility, anonymity, etc. But yeah, I mean, we've always felt that all of those can be regulated. I mean, even gold can be used as a private currency. There's no law against it. So, I mean, all of that can be regulated. Barter is as old as the ages. There is no law saying that you must buy and sell.
Yeah. Barter's been around for since the beginning of human interactions.
Exactly. I mean, it precedes money. I mean, that's the reason why we came up with money, to make barter less inefficient. But there's no law saying that you have to buy and sell something with rupees. The simplest of things, like exchange offers, when you trade in your old fridge for a new fridge with a discount, you're doing a barter plus cash transaction. Yeah. And there's no law saying that you can't do it. So is that fridge a private currency? Is anything other than cash a private currency? So that becomes a question. And I guess, I mean, we sound like a broken record, but we just keep saying regulate, don't ban.
Yeah, no, exactly. I love that. I'm gonna throw it back at you, man. You have questions for me, right? So
How did you transition from law to inactive lawyer to exchange CEO?
Yeah, so literally kind of knew I wanted to get an MBA when I applied to programs back then, and what happened was Kellogg had this cool thing. So it's kind of like, oh wow, I can get a law degree and an MBA, literally just an extra year. So kind of stumbled onto law. Never really thought I was going to be a lawyer growing up. But to be honest, I learned so much more there. Like the business side came to me kind of not easily, but it clicked me pretty easily. So it clicked like where I got economics and marketing. But the law, I kind of had to study, and it's kind of fun. That's that. And when I came out, got licensed, didn't, just pay for all that degree just to sit there and do nothing with it. And knew that I wanted to like use law within an entrepreneurial sense. So like even when I got the degree, I knew it'd be either, let's say something like, let's say intellectual property or mergers and acquisitions and doing deals. So the framework where another one of my, in the sense, people I really look up to is Mahatma Gandhi, right? And Gandhi was an attorney, right? And so post law school, really kind of fell in love with the idea of social impact, right? And what Mohammed Yunus had done with the Grameen Bank. And so over a couple of years came to the realization that the biggest social enterprise in the world was Bitcoin, right? And people don't, in fact, I rarely ever see it being used that way, right? People talk about, let's say, the Grameen Bank or Tom's Shoes or, Warby Parker in the USA or other places. There's also great microfinance institutions in India. To me, that's what Bitcoin is. It's a community-run social enterprise. And when I came to that realization, I was like, man, this is where I think I want to probably spend the rest of my life. I love this stuff. Like when I get up in the morning, I think about it. When I go to bed, I dream about it. My wife told me one time that I woke up, I said blockchain in the sleep. So what are you talking about? And I was like, I don't know. I was just thinking about blockchain. And so, but exactly. So what happened was when I came to this realization, also knew that I had a lot of love for India, even though I had, been born and raised in America. I thought that blockchain could make a huge impact among, the billion Indians in the world, especially on financial inclusion. And kind of through fate, through luck, I bought one of my first Bitcoins not through ZebPay, but the predecessor of ZebPay. It was called Buy Sell Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Maheen, who is a kind of helped get the Nishith Desai relationship. Bought Bitcoin back in 2013 from them, right? And I still hold those Bitcoin, but I haven't sold them, right?
Well done.
Yeah, and when I stumbled into Maheen like a few years later, I was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" I was like, "How are you guys gonna?" This ban just happened in New York the week after the ban happened, the week of the ban, the 2018 ban. And I said, "I don't know what you guys are doing, but if you ever want help or capital, I'd love to jump on the ship with you guys." And then through a lot of roller coaster ups and downs, eventually became CEO. And just realized that, hey, listen, if I want to make a big impact, I think the blockchain, lever. The great quote is, "Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I'll move the earth, right? Move the world." And that's what I think. So I to me, the lever is blockchain, not in a bad, financial leverage sense, but like the thing is, this technology, if used properly, can dramatically improve people's lives, right? And that's really what we're trying to do. So my goal as CEO of ZebPay is we're kind of moving more into the social impact area of what we're doing. And what can we do? I bring this up to a lot of our team members, is that my goal is to not make you rich. My goal is to make sure that no one's poor. And it sounds weird, right? But that's what I think we can do, right? Is it if we can use the technology to help people who don't have access to these financial resources, we can get it to them. And it's going to be a decades long goal, but that's what I think everyone is within the company is really excited about. Hopefully that kind of answered your question. It was a long-winded answer.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And so what do you think of the NFT craze? Any particular use cases you like? Is it so right now it's mainly digital art, right? But do you think it can be expanded?
Totally. I believe NFTs are going to be bigger than fungible tokens, right? And if you go look at the world, let's say the really cool thing about the digital world, you have let's say fungible tokens, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Theoretically, one Bitcoin is worth one Bitcoin. And $1 is worth $1. An ounce of gold is worth an ounce of gold, right? But then most of the world is not fungible. Most of the world is non-fungible, meaning that you have works of art. You have your car. So here's a perfect example: is your, let's say, Tata Indica or Tata Indigo, we both have the same car, right? But they're not interchangeable because yours might be in better condition, right? Even this exact same car, like blue, and seats, and even the mileage is the same. It's not the same car. They have different VIN numbers, and that's why NFTs. That's what they represent, really, in the sense that each of them is unique, and that's where I think what really happens. I think car titles, I think health insurance, I think artwork is just one of them. Music will all be NFTs. I think these are going to be. This is what's going to really power the maybe not this cycle, but the next cycle's big move into blockchain. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting times ahead.
I'm always a glass half full, but the water's bubbling over, and we're about to do some amazing stuff. And I agree, man. That's the reason why I put my heart, love, energy into ZebPay is that we really want to. I'm very optimistic for the long term, and I really agree. Well, awesome. I want to thank you for hanging out with me, man. This is great. Whenever you want to chat again,
sure.
We're here, and we'll come. I'd love for if you ever want to buy some more Bitcoin or Ether, man. Just feel free to give me a call. I'll give you, like I said, you should do what I do. Couple high ending points is it don't speculate, dollar cost average, and hodl. And then the other thing on is you're talking about privacy. I'll finish up with this. Is it you go check out Brave browser. It's a really cool privacy focused browser, and that's also like what we really believe in. So great, thanks Jaideep, really appreciate it. And then if you hope to stay in touch, man. Okay.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. This was nice.